we need to talk about why you're not building any muscle, right? You've been working out, you've been hitting the gym consistently. Maybe you even figured out how to lose a significant amount of body fat, and you think you have this health and fitness thing just by the freaking nards, right? Like, you're in complete control. You're the gangster. But for some reason, even though you've lost a bunch of weight, you still don't like what you look like. You look in the mirror and you feel very skinny. Or maybe you haven't lost a single pound at all because you haven't even gotten the diet part figured out. But you are wondering how to make sure while you lose weight, you actually build muscle at the same time so that you don't end up like the skinny guy who still hates what he looks like after losing 100 pounds. If that's you, or you're anywhere in between, or you're just wondering how to freaking build more muscle, then what I'm going to explain to you is hopefully a video that's going to save you from a lot of pain. Okay, so the number one reason why you are not building any muscle is because you are not consistent enough. Okay, and the key word there is enough, because I understand that different people who have experienced different levels of success in different realms of life, have different perceptions of what sufficient consistency is, right? Like, the guy who has no muscle might think that working out a few times every few weeks is consistent enough to build muscle and maintain that muscle mass. And I'm not saying that you don't build like any muscle whatsoever, but I'm talking about like an actual significant level of muscle mass by which would increase your level of confidence or increase the level of respect that you gain upon somebody glancing at your physique. Okay, significant muscle mass, noticeable muscle mass, actually looking like you work out. I understand that if you don't have that, you might think that working out a few times a week or every few weeks is enough. But if you ask anybody who has a significant level of muscle mass, I'm talking about like at the very minimum, a level of muscle mass that would create some sort of silhouette in your basic clothing, then you would understand that working out a few times every few weeks is not consistent enough. Okay, because the way that muscle works is that muscle, okay, and excess muscle mass specifically, when we're talking about looking good, being really, really strong, that's excess muscle mass. That's more muscle than your body actually needs in order to survive. Okay, it's all excess muscle mass. Okay, I'm not saying that you don't need it. There's obviously benefits of it, but you don't need it to survive. You don't need excess muscle mass. You don't need big biceps to stay alive. And so what happens when you have excess muscle mass is for every second that protein synthesis isn't being stimulated for that excess muscle mass is atrophying. It is reducing in size. So you either need to stimulate the protein synthesis via consistent training stimulus and or protein intake. If you're not doing either of those two things consistently, you're not going to build any muscle. And any inch of progress that you make from the one sporadic workout is going to instantly be lost from the multiple week long stints of not doing the workout. So reason number one is that you're not consistent enough. And if you hope to even accidentally build muscle, then you need to be lifting consistently. You need to be resistance training consistently. Now, reason number two why you're not building muscle is going to seem like a personal attack on your level of willpower, on your level of discipline, on your level of grit, on your level of manliness possibly. But this is another one of the most common reasons why you're not building muscle, even if you're consistent. So let's say you do work out. Let's say you work out 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 7 days a week, and you give yourself a little pat on the back as you walk out of the gym. But when you get home and look in the mirror, there's nothing to pat yourself on the back for. My monitor keeps going out. I don't know why this does this. But this needs to be said, so we're not going to pause the video. We're just going to unlock the computer. And we're going to continue. So, second reason why you are not building any muscle is because you don't train intensely enough. You literally give up too early when you're doing your workouts. You don't train hard enough. Okay, the reason I know that you don't train hard enough, and I know that this is starting to feel like a personal attack, and you're starting to think, you know what, Gabe, I do train hard enough. I train really, really hard. I'm the hardest worker in the room. Right? The rock. You wear your Under Armour shirt and you think you're the hardest worker in the room. It's hilarious. But the reason that I know you don't train hard enough is because I remember one of the first clients that I ever had before I understood these things. I'm not going to name his name, but I went to work out with him in person one day, and obviously we connected online. And I went to work out with him in person one day because he actually lived in Orlando, which is where I'm based out of in Florida. But I go to work out with him in person one day, and I remember looking at his statistics for his performance on his dumbbell bicep curl. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say that the most recent performance that he logged for his dumbbell bicep curl was like 17.5 pounds for 10 reps or something, right? And so ideally, his goal would have been to just add at least one rep to that performance. So he was going for 17.5 pounds by 11 reps. By the way, this guy was like prime example of lost 85 pounds, didn't build a single ounce of muscle, hated what he looked like, and was just skinny. You would never guess that he worked out a day in his life before we started working together. But anyway, I'm watching him do this dumbbell curl, 17.5 pounds. And I watch him get to rep like number 9, and the dumbbell is just flying up. It doesn't look hard at all. I watch him get to rep number 10, and it doesn't look difficult at all. And I watch him hit his PR. I watch him do the 11th rep, and it's still not difficult. And he goes to put the weight down because he hit a PR. But it doesn't even matter if he was progressing because it wasn't intense enough. See, the muscle only gets bigger if you provide it a sufficient stimulus to literally make it feel like it needs to be bigger and stronger to be able to handle the stress that you're putting upon it, right? And so it doesn't even matter if you're logging and progressing your numbers or if you're hitting PRs, and it doesn't even matter if you're working out consistently if you're not training intensely, if you're not training hard enough. It actually needs to feel subjectively hard. And the question might come to mind of like, but Gabe, how do I know if I'm training hard enough? How do I know? Like, what's the actual measurement? The measurement is the look on your freaking face at the end of the set. Okay, I wish I could share my screen with you in this video, but I'm not going to figure that out right now. I'll figure it out another time. But you should be making an ugly face at the end of your set. If you're not making an ugly face at the end of your set, if you're making a pretty boy face, or you're not breathing heavily, or you're not at least gritting down a little bit, and your face isn't red at least a little bit, then I can guarantee that you're not training hard enough. I can guarantee that you're not training hard enough. Okay, so on top of just being consistent, you need to make sure that every single set that you do, you take, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, to failure, to RIR 0. 0 reps in reserve. 0 reps left in the tank on every set that you do. And I know there are going to be studies that say it's not necessary to go to RIR 0 in every single set, and I understand that. I fully understand that. But those studies are done in a lab under absolutely perfect conditions and also untrained individuals, so people who don't lift weights. But that's fine. That's an aside. We're not going to get on a study rant here on this video. But what I've seen in my practice in the lives of real actual human beings is that even when you tell somebody to train to a certain intensity level, they usually pull back. Okay? And so if I tell you to leave 3 reps left in the tank, because technically that's sufficient to build muscle, you're probably going to leave more like 6 reps left in the tank. All right, and so my general recommendation to you, especially if you really care about building muscle, is to train to RIR 0, train to failure. Because even when you fail, you probably could have gotten more if there's a gun to your head, realistically. Okay, so train harder. Reason number 3, why you're not getting any muscle. And this goes for the guys who are actually a little bit more disciplined. This goes for the guys who actually go real, real hard. Okay, you hardcore dudes who bench 225 already. All right, this goes for you because I've seen the dudes who bench 225 for multiple reps already, and I've gone to the same gyms as them for years on end, and they still look the same. So there's something wrong, obviously. Okay, if this is you and you already really train really hard because you went and played high school football or something, or you're in the army or something, I don't freaking know, and you think you're a tough guy, which is okay. I've been there. Then most likely one of the reasons why you are not gaining muscle is because you're not objectively progressing. Okay, you're not objectively progressing. Remember how when we were discussing training harder, your level of intensity, we talked about how you actually need to be able to provide a level of stimulus that is greater over time upon your muscle so that your muscle has a reason to grow. A lot of the times you're training subjectively hard, but it's not objectively harder than last time. Okay, so you do need that subjective intensity. It needs to feel hard, but also needs to be objectively harder than last time. Okay, the actual term for the form of stress that causes muscle growth is mechanical tension. And mechanical tension is essentially the measure of the torque that a certain joint has to manage. Okay, and the muscle flexing is what manages the torque at the joint. I'm not going to get into the weeds any deeper than that before I lose some of you. But essentially what that means is the level of mechanical tension that you put on the muscle needs to increase over time if the muscle is to get bigger and stronger. Okay, and so on top of training really, really hard, you need to make sure that the amount of reps you do with the specific weight beats the amount of reps that you've done with the specific weight. So this is what somebody like Mike, there I go, I said his name, whatever, keep it in. I've worked with a lot of Mikes, so nobody's going to be able to tell unless you see this video. Sorry, Mike, this is just what happened. I love you. He's obviously not part of the Default Kings Association anymore. And so we're just going to move on. But this is where somebody like the client who lost a bunch of weight but had no muscle, who wasn't training hard enough, he actually got this right because he was trying to progress. He was looking at his logbook and saying, I got 10 reps last week with 17.5 pounds. I need to shoot for 11 reps this week and get 17.5 pounds. But all this needs to be done in unison. It needs to be done at the same time. You need to train consistently, period. You need to train intensely, and you need to be progressing. All of these three things need to happen at the same time. Now, the last reason why you are not gaining any muscle, let's say you're consistent. Let's say you train really hard. You're a tough guy. And let's say that you actually progress, like you're tracking your performance. If you're doing all those three things and you're still somehow not gaining any muscle, then the problem most likely is your execution. What is execution? Execution is your form. Okay. And I know I might start to sound like a form Nazi here. Okay. I don't know if you're allowed to say Nazi on YouTube. Like I might get banned or whatever. But I might sound like a form Nazi, but I'm not talking about like use good form because it's morally correct, like the ass to grass guys who are like, if your butthole isn't scraping across the ground when you do a squat, then you're not a good person, right? Those guys are a little bit weird. Those guys are a little bit crazy. And obviously I'm exaggerating what their point of view is. But the point I'm making is there's some people who are like form nerds, basically. They view good form as some sort of moral authority in the fitness industry. It's the weirdest thing in the world. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that good form, literally like good form, in my view, is what's defined as the movement in which your body will be taken through that will yield the most muscle growth on a per rep basis. Okay? What that means is if you have bad form, you can be doing the same amount of work but get less out of every single rep that you do. Literally. Okay, so you can train just as consistently as the other guy. You can train just as subjectively hard as the other guy. You can write down your progress and apparently progress, or progress on paper, just like the other guy. But if your form is worse than his, then the movement you're taking your body through with the specific weight in hand isn't going to stimulate muscle growth at the rate that it could. Okay, my favorite example of this is my little brother. My little brother is a great kid. He's a wrestling champ. He's a legend. He is super duper strong. He deadlifts, He deadlifted 455 for 3, and he's 17 years old. He did that when he was 16. He's a freak. Squatted 4 something, I believe. Crazy, just freak, strong dude. Really good physique. He got it from his brother, of course, obviously. But one day, I was lifting with my little brother, and he asked me, like, Gabe, is my form okay on this bicep curl thingy that I'm doing? And without even, like, explaining what he was doing wrong, I just asked him a question. I just said, Angel, how much weight am I using for the bicep curl exercise that we were doing? And he was like, this is a arbitrary number. I can't remember the number. But he said, you're using 50 pounds or whatever. And I was like, okay, how much weight are you using? He was like, well, I'm using 45 pounds or whatever. And I'm like, what do you think it's the likelihood that if you're using good form, you're capable of using, 90% of the load that I'm capable of using if my arms are twice as big as yours? How likely is it? That if you're using good form, you're able to use 90% of the load that I'm using. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, not very likely. I'm like, cool. That in itself tells you that your form is not good enough. All right. And I see this all the time where you'll see like beginners in the gym, okay, using like 35 pounds for their lateral raises. But then you'll see like a professional bodybuilder using like a 25-pound dumbbell for his lateral raise, right? Or you'll see a dude with really big arms using 30 pounds for dumbbell curls. And you'll see a dude with really small arms swinging around 30 pounds for his dumbbell curls. So that could be you too. And I know you might not think that you're doing it, but if you're already training consistently, if you're already progressing, and if you're already training intensely, then the only problem can be your form. Okay? Because assuming you already work out, the only three things that cause muscle growth are your intensity, progression, and execution, or how hard you train, how much you progress, and how good your form is. And so if you're already hitting the other two variables and actually showing up to the gym, the only variable left is your execution. Okay? By the way, if you can improve your execution, you can drastically increase the rate of muscle growth. And I do believe that when people talk about diminishing returns over time, as people train for longer periods of time, right, you gain less muscle. Obviously, if you've never lifted weights before, your body's going to explode the first year that you do it consistently. But I do think you can keep progressing over decades if you keep improving your execution. I think that one of the problems why people stop gaining muscle is not actually just because it's not new enough stimulus to the body, but it's because they literally just never intellectually take the time to improve their execution, improve their form. But again, we're getting on a tangent. So anyway, if this applies to you and you're wondering why am I not getting any muscle, then the number one likelihood is that you're just not consistent enough. Number two is that you don't train hard enough. Sorry, you don't. Number three is that you're not progressing objectively. And then number four is that your form is bad. Okay, it sucks. And you are wasting half the reps that you're doing. And if you want to fix those things, then make sure that you fix them. Okay, you fix the intensity by going harder. You fix the consistency by addressing whatever mental block is holding you from getting your ass up and getting to the gym. You fix the progression by tracking your workouts, and then you fix the execution by, this one's going to sound really, really dumb, by learning what good form looks like. Okay, love y'all. Have a good one.